Some of the skills that have carried over from my military experience to the civilian side, probably my detail-orientedness, if that's even a word.
I know a lot of attention to detail, patience. They've taught me patience because before I had none. Now I kind of have some. I do have some.
A lot of times going back to dealing with people and trying to keep them compliant, getting them to do what I want them to do, a lot of times it involves relating to them. And my experience with the military allows me a lot of opportunities to have, if not in-depth, at least some sort of experience dealing with a variety of individuals, a variety of situations where I can relate to someone.
It can be funny how in a room nobody necessarily wants to take charge, or someone doesn't necessarily want to task another person with something to do. And so you can be left with this amorphous, we will complete this. And you know, a lot of times that's we who? We me, we you, we somebody else. And so I think from the military context, I'm used to the organization, the order of like assigning tasks and subtasks and what domains people are going to complete their work in. And I think that's helped facilitate some of the work when I'm sitting in on a group.
I think I've really been very fortunate in that I had a job in the Army for most of my career. That was something I was interested in doing. It's something that I wanted to do outside of the military as well. So being a broadcast journalist has helped me immensely in every role I've had since then.
Operate machinery and follow the direction and like manuals.
Well, in the military, you do get a lot of leadership training, and some of it I requested, and some of it is kind of mandatory fun that the Air Force or any military branch will send you to, and I try and transition that over.
I think I have learned some things from my military training and leadership courses that I've been to in the military.
I lived and worked in Okinawa, Japan for 3 years, but I also went to the Philippines, to South Korea, to Bangladesh, to mainland Japan. And you really learn how to work across cultures. You learn how to communicate. You don't necessarily speak the same language, and so you're using interpreters, and just being used to working in a way that's very different.
It's funny because the skills that I've earned in the military, that I learned in the military, I didn't do when I got out. Because I was in the military, I was sheet metal fabrication. I did welding, carpentry, that kind of stuff. I got out, became a baker. And then went into office work and then became an inspector. You know, being a writer and designer with the Walt Disney Company, being a marketing director at a BMW store, and all my government work, it's helped me in everything I do.
I give everyone the benefit of the doubt, and I assign tasks and I follow up with them. I try not to hover over them and be a micromanager, but I want to make sure that they have the resources they need to get that task done, and if they need help, not everyone's great at asking for help, so some people will sit there and struggle and try and get it done, but if you check up on them, they're more than willing to go, well, I just haven't figured this piece out, and I'll say, okay, let me send in this person, and he can give you a hand, and you guys can tag team and get it done. Those are a lot of skills I learned in the military that I try to use in my civilian job as well.
About to talk to different people, and about to listen and active listening, and about to seek problem. I think that's a big set of skills.
Where I kind of fall back on that is, a lot of it has to do with awareness, mental preparation, mental toughness, dealing with individuals that are yelling and screaming at me, cussing at me, calling me all sorts of names, being able to maintain that professional bearing, maintain focus on the goal, be able to separate myself from the negative feelings that I'm getting from them. That's something that I've taken away from the military that I rely on heavily.
So dealing with the media, being a spokesperson for the organization that I work for, producing video, all those skills were things that I learned in the Army as a broadcast journalist, and I've been very lucky. Those skills easily translate into something that, the jobs that exist in the civilian world.
Well, I was really excited to join the city attorney's office. This is exactly what I wanted to do. I felt that this job was going to be very similar to the jobs that I'd had in the military.
The federal government mandates a specific way that you respond to emergencies. It's called the Incident Command System, and it is very similar to the way that the military operates day to day. So when I was a Marine in Afghanistan and I did it every day, day in and day out for 7 months, it's almost exactly what I use for the city, or if we had a big earthquake, it's the system that we would use. So just being really closely familiar with that has helped so much in my work at PBEM.
My line of work now with the city is compliance work. I work in the Extremely Distressed Property Enforcement Program. So I'm dealing with problematic properties around the city, and I'm having to serve search warrants on these properties, vacate them, meaning that by order remove everybody from the property. I'm having to compel people to comply, and obviously the first level is to try and get them to do it of their own volition rather than forcing them to do it or doing it for them. So using that and going back on that, I'm able to keep myself safe from that skill set by being aware of what's going on, and I'm able to confidently handle people that are agitated and in difficult situations. So that's kind of the number one thing I'd probably rely back on.
I think one of the advantages of my specific job in the Army is that being a broadcast journalist, that has helped me in my job here in the city of Portland. I was really hired as a communications coordinator to deal with the media, to write press releases and things like that. But because of my experience in the Army with broadcast journalism, which is writing, it's dealing with media, it's shooting and editing video and all that, I've been able to bring all that to the table and really kind of expand the scope of my position to better tell the story of the Bureau. I think it's made me a really awesome resource for the Bureau because I can do a lot of different things, in part due to my training in the Army.
Business writing classes when I was in the Navy, because they offered those when we were out to sea. That helped me out with doing reports and things. Because I used to be, before I became a building inspector, I was an office support specialist. So I had that skill.
I wouldn't say that in my current job I lead like I did as a commander in the military. There was a lot more responsibility, and I had 500 plus people that I was leading. I have a smaller team now, and it's a little more cooperative. So I still try and lead, but I also want to participate. So I kind of change it up a little bit. But there are a lot of leadership type skills that you definitely learn and that easily translate into civilian.
I want to work in a team cohesive, which is from the military background. Motivate the team to get things done.
So as a brigade judge advocate, I had worked for a brigade which has about 4,100 soldiers. And we have everything from a police force to federal employee civilians, contractors. We have a geographic footprint. And so it's not unlike a city. We have different individuals doing different jobs. And in that position, I reported to a commander, similar to like the mayor or council here. And I didn't interact with the commander every day, though. A lot of my advice was to his directorate. So it might be the person in charge of personnel or human resources or supplies or technology. And so if you could think of them as like bureau department heads, it was the same thing of having to balance those needs, help the commander accomplish his goal, but also having to balance giving advice to all those entities when everybody wanted their project or thing to be number one in the queue. I think it can be very similar to the city, how we have different bureaus, different people who come to our office that we have to advise. And I'm lucky I deal with only a small window of the city, but I have the same issues where I have to prioritize and decide how to complete my work in an equitable fashion and to help council meet their mission and goals.
Getting to that level where people can relate as humans and they no longer see me as the city inspector, they see me as another person. I take those military experiences and use those to kind of tap into that. again, looking at it as experiences I got from the military. Sometimes it's different places in the country I've been, foods I've eaten, people I've met, things I've done that allow me to pick up on little subtle details when dealing with those customers, and I can start asking them questions and getting involved with them at a personal level rather than just as a government official.
Taking charge of tasks. I mean, I think the military taught me that, you know, if somebody else doesn't step forward, then I'm going to do it. I'll step forward and take reins. Yeah.
One of the biggest differences I see in the military is in the military, you're in charge and you basically say, this is what we're going to do and we're going to make it happen. And it's a lot different on the civilian side. There's a lot more consensus building and communicating and buy-in. And you're not always on such a time crunch as you are in the military. A lot of things in the military are mission critical. They need to be done now. Don't ask any questions. You're told what to do. Get your job done. That's not how it goes in the in the civilian side. And civilians like to ask a lot more questions. So you need to be prepared to explain the reasoning behind some things sometimes. And it's not always, well, I told you to do it. You just go do it. There's a lot more of, this is what we need done. If you have any questions, come ask.
One of the things I really enjoyed doing in the Army was helping other folks with their resumes. You know, if you're in the artillery, that's really hard to translate into a civilian job. So when folks are transitioning out of the military, I used to volunteer to help out with resume writing and cover letter writing to, you know, translate those very specific military skills into something that made sense to civilian folks who are hiring.
I worked a lot in the Philippines, and they, like, every single decision went all the way up to the very top person and then all the way back down. So just the timeline of work, you know, taking many months to get some things done was interesting.
As service members, we have trouble speaking about ourselves in interviews. We always talk about our team's achievements, right? You know, I was on a team that achieved this. My platoon did this. My company did this. And you were part of it. And you may have played a huge role in that, but it's really hard for us to take on that as an individual achievement. We tend to look at everything as a team.
Artillery is basically, you know, so how do you translate that into civilian skills? But I always enjoy doing that, and it's work that I actually still do to this day, is to assist veterans in starting their own businesses and translating a lot of that experience into civilian language.
Ooh. So what do I wish city employees knew about the skills that I carried over from the service?
Yeah, I don't know that I necessarily wish people to understand something about me, but I'd hope that other employees would understand the breadth of experience that service members have and the value that they can bring to the table.
There's a lot of camaraderie in both sides of my career. In the military side, obviously, you're working in teams to accomplish a goal, accomplish a mission. And a lot of times you're in adverse situations. You know, you're in a deployed location with very little resources, or you're working on a time crunch on something, and that really translates into the civilian side as well.
Yeah, I think there's always improvement, you know, as, you know, other employee or co-worker or even myself. You know, I like to learn, you know, my co-worker have, like, you know, family, background, you know, us understanding more, you know, as I would like them to understand me.
I mean, we're talking about soldiers that are on average between 20 and 24. And when I remember one time I went out to the desert of Idaho, and we set up in the middle of nowhere, and we have all these trailers, and we're brought in, and within 24 hours, you would be in awe. We had a full functioning command post. We had internet access. We had meals, laboratories. We had a full functioning little village that was set up in under 24 hours. So, I mean, when we think of experiences and values that service members might have, when you look for somebody, for example, maybe in IT, somebody who works in that S6 section in the military, yeah, they still might have problems connecting you to your printer, but I mean, have they ever set up an entire network and LAN configuration in the middle of a desert using satellites? I mean, this is just not experience that you get in the civilian world very commonly.
Yeah, I think one of the things we deal with a lot in my work in racial equity is there's a tendency for some folks to treat certain racial groups as as a monolith, as just one group, and there's a lot of assumptions made and things like that. And I think it's very similar to when people are thinking about veterans.
I'd really like my coworkers to be able to not necessarily think that just because I've served in the military that somehow I'm a threat. We're people just like them. You hear so much about PTSD and people kind of going off the rails, and we all know that from the service side that's few and far between. We do a good job of taking care of our own for the most part, but I'd like to be able to deal with some people where they're not fearful. I think that at times there are people that are a little bit fearful. They're like, oh, you've served in the military, you know how to kill. It's like, well, okay, but not really. That's not my primary job. It's something that we're all trained to shoot, but that doesn't mean that we're just going to go off the rails and go do it. That doesn't mean that we're going to go do that. We don't need to be seen as a threat. We need to be seen as an asset.
I think sometimes people make assumptions about you. I definitely feel like I get it from people have these assumptions of what a Marine is or what the Marine Corps is like that I don't necessarily agree with. I definitely get sometimes I do something, people are like, oh, well, you did this because you were a Marine. So that's something that annoys me a little bit, attributing kind of being direct or being assertive towards, it's not quite Portland polite. So then it's like, oh, that's because you're a Marine.
Have more pride in the things that I do, more pride in who I am. And I think they distilled in me that anything that I want in life, as long as I worked hard for it, I can accomplish it.
In the military and in the civilian law enforcement world, that's your team, and you can rely on each other. Office worker, downtown Portland doesn't, often deal with other office worker in another bureau and have to rely on them and have their back like the police bureau really, even if you don't work with them day to day, that person is there for you. And it was like that a lot in the military too. You could, regardless of what branch, I mean, we all make fun of, the other branches, the Army, the Air Force, the Navy, the Marines, even the Coast Guard. We make fun of each other, and you'll see all the memes, go across Facebook or whatever, picking on each other. But when it came push to fight, you were there, regardless of what service you were in, what branch. You were there, and you were backing each other up.
I think one of the things that kind of help to understand a coworker is try to understand, the other coworkers, so they in turn hoping that they, understand me.
Maybe they're standoffish. Maybe they are making a lot of assumptions based on what they've seen in the media or movies growing up, and I think those assumptions can be dangerous in some ways, and those assumptions can be very discriminatory. I think there's not. I can't think of all the veterans I know. There are none that are exactly the same, right? They're all different experiences. So I would encourage folks to, if they know they're working alongside a veteran, to, maybe ask some meaningful questions and engage, just like anyone else. Just engage them in conversation to find out if you are making some unfair you know, assumptions about that person. But it's just such a diverse group of people who have decided at one point in their lives to sign up for something where they could, you know, defend their country and do some serious service for their country. But that doesn't mean we're all the same, and we're just individuals. And I think you could have some really amazing conversations with these folks and find out more.
So when those applicants are applying, I think I would like other city employees to know, and maybe just imagine and ask the veteran about what their experience is within that category. Because again, even when I deployed, it wasn't like I worked 40 hours a week, Monday through Friday. We worked every day of the year. And I remember I didn't get a day off until about 3 months in. But I mean, my legal experience there was not 40 hours a day. You know, it was 80 hours a week, because all I did was live, breathe, and work international laws and the federal laws that applied to either my cases that I was prosecuting or the investigations I was doing. So I would like other city employees to maybe just highlight that and know that that employee may not necessarily, or that applicant may not know the best way to describe it on a resume, but in the interview process, they could interview them, ask them about their background, what their experience is, and they might be impressed with what they've actually done.
I don't know, just embrace your service. Feel proud of what you did. I mean, it may not seem like a lot to the, you know, to them at the time, but it was huge for other people.